Yeah, so Per and I are here, Per is coming up a little later, to talk about a project we called Belle, which is just a silly name. We like to give things a silly name, and then every now and then they actually end up staying. This is just a code name. But before we get into details around it, I more than anything would like to say that it's actually really nice to be in front of so many people and not having to cancel anything. It's quite nice. And it's also fantastic to come back to the UK festival year after year and see how it grows. So we did some math, because you need charts. This is the only chart of the day, I hope. And this actually shows that in 2015, the UK festival will be bigger than Code Garden. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, the project Belle, for those who didn't follow it on Twitter and heard about it, it's like a research project around the Umbraco user interface. And we have some new ideas for how a future UI for Umbraco could look and work. And just before we show some of the sketches, we'd like to just look at what we have right now, why it's looking as it is, and also slowly show the different parts of the sketches, so you actually understand what problems are we trying to solve, rather than how does it look. Because when people talk about design, there's a tendency to focus on how it looks and what colors are used, rather than what problems are we actually trying to solve, and that's design for us. So this section isn't as much about visual design as it is about the product design of Umbraco. But before we do that, let's just take a look at where we come from, because Umbraco is 10 years old next year, 8 years as an open source project. And this is actually how the first icons in Umbraco look, and it's Danish. And actually, Per has a really cool idea that actually getting t-shirts produced with some of these icons really would be kind of fun. But when I started designing Umbraco back in early 2000, this was the coolest Apple product. So this is around Umbraco. The first version of Umbraco was released in 2003. This was the best browser. Yep, no kidding. This was my laptop, and it was really, really cool. It was, and weighed a ton, and costed a lot of money. And this was actually how Warren looked. So it's kind of a long time ago, right? Sorry, Warren. And this was the first version of Umbraco. This was actually Umbraco 1, version 1, which wasn't open source. And there's a lot of reasons why it looked the way it did. Back in 2003, there was no such thing as Gmail, Facebook. I don't even know maybe it was there, but not that commonly known. And there was no Web 2.0, no Basecamp, no. In fact, there was no faith in web applications at that time. So if you wanted to have a web application used by people and trusted by people, you had to try to use desktop metaphors at that time. So this is why we had a tree view, we had a context menu, and actually the biggest selling point was that it looked like Microsoft Word, right? That was, oh, that's nice. And this is actually this is our legacy. And to sum up, at 2003, Umbraco was a tiny CMS. There wasn't that many resources available. It was in the beginning. It was only me. Later on, Kasper Bumbeck, who's now doing Chainbox, which some of you might know, he came on board in 2004, where we started to make it open source. The type of sites Umbraco was running at that time, which was about 25, including demo sites. You know, the biggest one was maybe 1,000 nodes. It was around that size. And the content structures were really simple. There wasn't no content repositories with teasers as we see today. There wasn't a lot of dictionary items. It wasn't multilingual, all that kind of stuff. So there was no reason for the UI to sort of support that, for instance. Then this is how Umbraco looks today. Can everybody see it? No, okay. You know how it looks. And if you look at it, it's basically just a skinned version of what was made in 2003. The icons are a bit different. The tree icons is a bit nicer. Thank God the drop shadows are gone. But it's still kind of the same of what we had. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, because until recently, the resources have still been limited. Umbraco has grown, but it also takes a lot of resources to just keep up with the growth and fixing bugs, etc. So there hasn't really been a lot of time to focus as much on the UI as we really want to, because that's one of the things that Per and I love to do. Another reason is also that, or a lot of the UI is also very generic. Again, because of resources, there isn't time to focus on every single little detail. So a lot of it, the Umbraco UI is built up around a couple of custom controls, but then just repeated all over the place. And you can sort of, when you work with it, you can actually tell that there isn't a lot of TLC in each single dialogue of the core. So if we look at the Umbraco world today, Umbraco is one of the biggest global CMS in the world, which is kind of crazy. If we use them, we have shitloads of resources. We saw that yesterday when Adam and Anthony of the Codeworks arranged a hackathon, a bug fix marathon, where we were, how many were we? 15, 20 people sitting in a room, and we actually fixed 31 bugs yesterday in the core. So that's a good example of if we can actually use the resources in the community, we should be able to do more than we do now. Also, Umbraco, as you know, is running all types of sites, brochure sites to e-commerce, whatever, and also all types of content structures. And it's been quite fun for us to look at. We made this statistic package that some of you installed, where we had statistic back from actually 430 sites this morning, and we could see that Umbraco is used in a zillion different ways. And you have from really tiny, simple content structures to tens of thousands of nodes in all different types of scenarios. But if you look at it, as I said before, then UI-wise, what we have is actually just a skinned version of what's back in 2003. So it's really time to rethink the UI. And this is why Per and I started this project Belle. So the story of this is, we hired Mark Bolton Design last year to do a lot of research around how did people use Umbraco, what's needed, and come up with a great range of ideas of what we should focus on UX-wise. And Alex Morris, who we work with at Mark Bolton, he's now at Adobe, did a tremendous job on doing research in that area. And then we started to prototype and just played with how Umbraco could look in the future. And this was where we started. So we basically started to shuffling the elements around, more or less to think of the UI as now you have widescreen monitors. We also have an issue with, there's actually on many installs, there's actually quite a lot of external apps or sections. The old one could only contain 8 icons, and there's actually sites that has many more than that. So just use the space to make sure that you could have more icons. Then another thing which you can't see in this one is also making search the major thing. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. And also try to limit the number of tabs. It's like, from up here it looks like it's really difficult to see the screenshot, but the idea is that it's never been the intention to have a lot of tabs on a content type or document type for several reasons. First of all, it looks really bad. A lot of information gets hidden. The pages are slower because you have more data on a single node. And it's usually a symptom of not having great content structures. But the UI doesn't kind of tell you it's a really bad idea to have a lot of tabs. So one of the things we want with the new UI is saying if you have more than 4 or 5 tabs, we're actually going to hide them. And you can't see it, but there's going to be a little drop down here where if you actually have more tabs, we'll hide them in there to sort of provoke you to actually have better content structures. Another thing we also we're going to have is one-to-one translations of content or lingual or culture variations of content, and the UI will support it. If you have, let's say we have this page also in French, we will have a little arrow and you can swap between versions of the content. It hasn't been possible in the core in the past, but we're making some changes to the internal APIs that makes this possible. And this also means you need less tabs, because you don't need content and content in French and etc. as we've seen from some of the stats that people are doing. So this is sort of the first draft. And we just started playing in Photoshop, mucking things around. And then to sort of find out whether this UI works or not, we moved into a prototyping tool called Envisio, which is basically just a tool where you upload some screenshots and you can make hotspots on them, so you can actually start clicking. And we also started to update the UI a little bit. And one of the things we started to focus on is we want to keep Umbraco simple, but we actually want to make it even more simple UI-wise, less clutter, less elements. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. If we can make it still look pretty, then it's actually going to take up more mental space when you work with Umbraco. It's more about your content or your site than you're using an app. And to sort of complement that, one of the things we have, if you look at this UI, is we have no branding at all. There's not an Umbraco logo anywhere. On the login screen, there's a tiny Umbraco logo, but when you log in, you actually have your body icon. And that's the only thing, because if you're an editor, it's about your content. It's not about making content with an Umbraco app. If you're a developer, then it's about how you implement Umbraco. So that's one of the key ideas. Then we started to work a little bit with the icons on the left, making them more simple again. Then we looked at search, which was one of the things that came out of the Mark Bolton research, was that people really wanted stable search, but also a search that just worked. And it's also how you navigate today more and more if you think about it. So when you see, for instance, when you see ads, it used to say go to this website. Now it says search for whatever company on Facebook. When you use Gmail, you don't use folders that much. You just use search. In Windows 8, you don't have the start menu, but you actually just hit Windows and start typing, and then you search for your apps. And even in the latest Mac OS 10, you are actually no longer, you don't have folders by default anymore. You just have global search. So it's definitely a trend because the computing power is stable enough. And we have resources in the community who can help us make a really, really fast and stable search. So that's one of the things we want. I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Then we wanted to make the tree a little bit more simple, have more white space. And one of the reasons for that is that the sites being made with Umbraco is getting bigger and bigger, so we have more and more data. And one of the things we are seeing, and in our support, for instance, one of the complaints we get is that Umbraco can be slow. Then when we research why, it's because there's 500 items in the tree under the same parent. And some of that is caused by, some of this slowness is caused by Umbraco, but some of it is also caused by the browser just having to render such a big tree, and massive memory uses as well. So some of you may have heard about container document types. Raise of hand, how many? Okay, so it's a project we started, and unfortunately it's more complex than I thought in the beginning. I'm a natural born optimist. But the idea is that you can flag a document type as a container document type. Again, it's a code name. Luckily, hopefully we'll come up with something more clever. But if you actually check that box, any children of that document or a document based on that document type won't show its children in the tree. Instead, you will have a tab view. So let's take a look at that. And of course, because it's just screenshots and we made them in a bigger resolution, and then this projector, you can't see all of it. But the idea is actually that if you have a lot of news items, then rather than them being in the tree and people come up with all sorts of hacks, like date folders or category folders or alphabet folders to sort of limit the size of the tree, then you actually have them in a grid view where they belong. And you can start doing bulk operations, you can search for them, you can filter on them, etc. So that's one of the ideas or new concept for the new UI. And it actually means that if we do this, then we won't have huge trees, which means that we can start making more white space, and we can make the trees look a little bit more nice. So that's another of the things that we're working on. Then I mentioned search. So the idea is, again, that you search, and when you search, you don't just search for content, you actually search for everything you have permissions for, and it comes up instantly. So that will be your main source of navigation as well. So those who've also said, well, one of the downside of container document types is maybe it causes a few more clicks to find a news item if you want to edit it. Well, you can search for it and it just comes up. Also, even if you're in content, you want to edit a template, you just start typing and you just pick the template. And again, another thing is that the context menu will always be available when you search for things. So you'll have the same context menu in search results as you have in the tree again. And then speaking of the context menu, one of the things that also changed dramatically since 2003 is devices. So in 2003, almost everybody, except if you were a musician and a designer, was on Windows. There was no such thing as smartphones. Well, Nokia claimed they had some. But that also meant that, you know, the main way you interact with Umbraco is right-click. You know, I try to touch with my right hand, and it doesn't make any difference when I'm on a tablet. So you don't have those concepts anymore. If you're on a Mac, well, you can right-click, but people don't know. It's not intuitive. So one of the things we also changed is the context menu. You no longer have right-click. When you hover, you see a small icon, and when you click on it, you actually get the context menu. So let's take a look at that. Again, we're prototyping, so take it easy, right? The idea with the context menu is actually right now we just have a huge list of items, and it's just the place where you place functionality when you interact with content, and we think that's a problem. We're seeing if you just install like 10 of the most popular packages in Umbraco, your context menu gets quite big. Because that's just where you place things. And it's also where we always place things. Again, lack of resources to actually work with every single detail. But one of the things we found out through research was that the main thing that people do when they right-click is create. And yet it has the same priority as the least used function, which is assign a host name, or manage host names, right? There's no difference other than the order of the items. So what we want is we want to make sure that you have fewer clicks, so you open up the context menu and instantly you can just click whatever document type you want to create. So that was first draft, and then we have the other things underneath. Then we actually start to play with the idea, what if we actually just say, if most people just want to create, why not make it less cluttered and just show the items that you can actually create? So this was the next idea, because then we have space for actually the descriptions again, and more white space. Again, if you wanted to do something else, you have an extra click. But it also means that for editors, they primarily focus on creating content or maintaining content. And for us, for instance, then the second most used feature is delete a node. But there's actually no reason why that would be in a right-click menu. We could easily put it on the edit page itself, for instance. The same with the audit trail. We actually have an area on the properties tab where we talk about versions and dates, etc. Why not put audit trail and rollback information there instead? So just by mentally hiding secondary interactions with content, you actually start to think, hopefully also as a package developer, that you could place functionality in context with where it's relevant, rather than just in a right-click menu. That said, if you then really want to access the other thing, you just click here and you see the list of items there. So that's another idea. Let me just see here. Another thing that we wanted to do is work on the different pickers. It's one of the things that the U components have been really, really good at, giving TLC and a lot of attention to detail to different data editors. The default one in Umbraco, there's not that much love in each of them because of resources again. So one of the ideas, for instance, was to look at just the date picker, just making it a bit more beautiful. The current date picker is really ugly. Also try to make it a bit more intuitive. Another thing is, for instance, the page pickers. So make them look a little bit nicer and actually have search in them as well. And when you choose something, it actually shows more metadata than we have today. In this case, we have the icon plus we have the full path to the page you've picked, which is one of the things that people have requested as well. And again, this attention to detail, we can do that in a lot of different places. This is, again, just draft, but rather than having everything generic, we can actually also start to look at, when you work with the template editors, etc., then actually look at how can we optimize each of the screens. And again, this is early work. We've been working on this for what, 100 hours, 120 hours? Something like that. So, I mean, we're not there yet. So we just want to show what we're working on and get feedback. The last thing that I think I forgot to mention is also when you then edit the page, essential thing, you can actually see what page you're editing. Kind of nice. And as I mentioned again, if you have a variation of the page, you have a symbol telling you what variations you have. And of course, you can change the name of the page by just clicking on the title of it. So I think that was about where we were when we...
Notifications.
Notifications, yep. Thanks. That's another thing. Let's see if we can see it here. First of all, better feedback on errors and focus. So if you actually publish something, rather than just saying there's an error on this tab, actually go to that tab, focus on the editor where the problem is, because a common reason for that is editors editing the rich text editor and forgetting that there's apparently some metadata on one of the other tabs. That's mandatory. And again, notifications. We had the little speech bubble. Talk about a desktop metaphor. Actually, the first time, one of the first time I demoed Umbraco to an agency in Denmark, there was a program manager who said, when he saw the speech bubble, which is just a picture, right? Because it's a web app, he said, that's one of the cool things about .NET. You can just reuse existing components in Windows. Yeah. Didn't want to insult him, right? But we want the problem about that speech bubble is that it contains very little information and only one thing at the time. So have some more bigger notifications and actually make it possible for package producers to have a queue of notifications, and we can display more of them. So no more weird little speech bubble saying publish, cancel by a third party. Go guess. Now, as a package developer, you're actually able to, or when you do the integration, you're actually able to say can't publish because of this. So that's another thing. And I think that's where we were with this InVisio thing. But then we wanted to have like an HTML prototype as well, and it's one of the things that Per has been working really, really hard with. So I think Per should show you Belle and how we think it could look. Good luck.
Thanks. So does the microphone work? Okay, somewhat at least. Right. So as Niels said, we had a prototype. Should I just adjust this just a bit so you can see everything? There. So the idea is to really radically change the login screen. So add a bit of humor and add a lot of simplicity and the minimal amount of branding. So when the user log in, at some point, maybe I should just go full screen so we can see. So you get in here, and in the upper corner, you can see that it changes to your avatar. So it's not about Umbraco, it's about you and the content that you want to do. So let's just do that again. So you log in. And you see your UI, that's Umbraco, but it is really yours. So that's a main focus, that we can change that perception of having a system, that it's more about you and what you do. So the system adjusts to you and not the other way around, which is a major thing and really a really strong signal to send to your editors and your developers, that it's more about them than it's actually about Umbraco. So this is our working prototype. So we did a new tree to implement the new context menu. And as Niels said, it's much easier to actually get to content creation. Oops. It's easier to get to content editing. And the use of limiting the amount of tabs is implemented here, for example. So you get a little drop-down menu, which you can see on a larger resolution. Still a work in process. We're really trying to limit the amount of tabs, as you can see. So with new editors, we removed a lot of the desktop metaphors as Niels about. So if you have icons on your rich text editor, that's where they go. You don't have this icon bar inspired by Microsoft Word anymore. You actually have buttons that tells you what to do, so you don't have to guess what a floppy disk plus a globe. And in 5 years, nobody will know what a floppy disk is anyway, so we're kind of trying to be proactive about it. So you get more visible buttons, you get more visible primary actions, so you can see what's going on. And of course, yeah, you can edit stuff up here and make typos. And with a new notification bar as well. So that's the new editor and a much cleaner interface for editing things in it. So as Niels said, there's easier access for creation. So you get the list of content that you are to create in here. And this takes you directly to the editor, and you don't have to think about that. And if you kind of change your mind, you don't want to create anything, you can just skip it and it's not saved at all. So this is just this just creates an editor for you that loads a lot faster, because it doesn't have to think about a current document or any versions or anything. So you get to the actual editing experience a lot faster than you used to do. And again, in here, just start typing and you're good to go and create your document. And as Niels said, of course, you have access to the, and as a power thing, you can also this little icon to get direct access to it. Wouldn't mean anything to most content editors, but for most of the people in the room, it's nice to have the direct access to it as well. So one of the things we've talked about, we really want to do is also to make it a more custom thing. So the icon up here, right now it just represents the version dialog. I think in the long run, we've talked a lot about making dashboards much more customizable. So you can drag things into your own custom dashboard. You can have collections of your content, your searches, and your different actions. So if you kind of imagine that you could later on define your own actions and make a collection of things that you do in this system, you could have it in one location. So say that our news editor, in 99% of the cases, he logs in, he browses the tree to news, and then he creates an article. Why not try to define these actions already, so you kind of have a template to get going with? Save some time and just have it as a personalized thing in this dialog for you to use. So that's some of the things that we're talking about as well. How could we make this much more accessible as a developer, but to the editor just Does this work better? Nope. Oh, now it does. Okay, so and as Niels talked about before, one of the big things is search. We really want to make as a main navigation. So this is where you find all your things, because as Niels says, sites are getting bigger and bigger. So the tree is very hard to browse for things in a specific location. You know what it's named, but you still have to click 12 times to actually get to it. So making a search much faster, so you can just browse directly to it and start editing it, will make your navigation around even a big site much faster. But you can also extend it a bit more. So say that you want to exit a XLT file, for example. You could do that as well directly from the search and go directly to it as well. So these are the ideas, and this is the current prototype running on top of a live Umbraco installation. So this is all live data. This is the default examine implementation powering the search inside of this prototype. It searches XLT files and templates and document types. We use the standard different components that's already in Umbraco. We've just added a new layer of HTML based on Twitter Bootstrap on top of it. So this is a live site running with this new UI on top of it. So it's with 100 hours put into it, it's not really that big of a project. It's not gigantic. It's not a year ahead of work to actually get something working. But this is where we are right now. So this is a current demo. Thank you.
So I think we have one last little slide in terms of where we are, what we want to do. As Per said, it's actually real. It is running on top of Umbraco 4.9, so it's not like it's just an HTML prototype. It's actually working. We're seriously looking at targeting spring 2013. So again, it's not something a long-term project. After we've been working on it, we know that we can pull it off pretty fast. And we really would like to have contributors. We've been working on this ourselves for some time. Then we hooked up with Anders Stendebjerg, as some of you may know, to work a little bit on tweaking the design. We hired a guy with the coolest name on the planet, Maximilian Larsen, who is actually the creator of Helveticons, if you know him. And he will produce some custom section icons for us. So we have some really nice, beautiful, not stock icons in the left side of the tree. But if you want to contribute, then we have a breakout session at XXXX. So we didn't know when at that time, but I think at 2:30, the break 2:30. If you want to contribute and have time, because that's kind of a essential thing in this, we don't need people who say, yes, it could be fun, I can contribute, and then when you get back, you don't have time. But if you actually have skills, want to put your mark on the Umbraco core and the future of how the Umbraco UI will be, meet us at 2:30 break, and let's talk about it. And of course, one of the things we're looking at is UX experts, but also people who can help us with wording, because that's a big part of UX. Help text, what are things called? For instance, should we keep calling things, the sections, settings and developer? Settings makes no sense. You know, it's just a word I came up with 10 years ago, but I don't think, you know, a template is a setting. I don't know. I think settings is what's in the Umbraco settings config maybe. So actually start working on some of the wording, and if you're new to Umbraco, it's a really, really positive thing, because a lot of us is just damaged, and don't question, for instance, the name of the sections. But of course, also visual designers, people who can help us prettify, is also a great idea, a great contribution. So one of the things we also hope with this UI project is also to activate parts of the community who don't feel like they can contribute so far. After Code Garden, we actually managed to activate a lot of developers. In fact, there's been more people contributing to the core the past 3 months than the past 8 years of Umbraco, when we count all patches and pull requests. So that's developers, but there's many areas where you can contribute to the Umbraco project in general. And if you're a designer or a front-ender, this is one of the areas as well. And even if you're project managers, etc., you can contribute to Umbraco as well, as Adam and the CodeWorks team have demonstrated today, that just that we have this UK festival is actually also a huge contribution to the Umbraco community. So we think the future is pretty exciting. Also, we have shitloads of ideas of what we can with this. As Per mentioned, it's based on Twitter Bootstrap, which also means that it's in terms of markup, it's cleaner. There's not a lot of JavaScript who's constantly monitoring the size of things. It's really, really clean. And when you look at how many browser resources the new UI uses compared to the old one, there's a massive difference in terms of how fast it is. So that's one thing. And this Twitter Bootstrap, what it actually means is that now we have a common vocabulary and we have a UI framework for actually making packages. So hopefully we can also make some great guidelines for package developers. How do you actually make UI for Umbraco? And there's a lot of other things. Per mentioned the dashboard, the idea that as you browse the tree or search for anything, you can drag them to your body icon, and if it's content, you'll be asked, do you want to add a small widget for creating this type of content at this location? Do you always want to see the 10 latest items in that part of the tree, etc.? So we can start making all sorts of really fast, easy customizations of the UI, so people can make work faster with the tool. Another thing is also like a more advanced rich text editor. Right now, we've seen examples, and Matt made a really cool prototype of actually a working package with a widget grid. What is it called? Yeah, which is kind of cool for dragging different types of items in a specific grid. The Go Basic project, which is the state of Denmark, who has their own Umbraco distribution for all their state agencies. They've actually made a really cool widget framework as well, where you define columns and permission for what type of modules and small widgets that you want in a grid, and you can just drag them in, and they're going to open source that as well. And there's also some people in Australia who works on the same. If we could get them to collaborate and actually have a rich text editor where you define columns and where you define what type of content can you actually create in this grid, and editors can just drag them into these columns, I think it would be really nice. So instead of working in the rich text editor, right-click an image and say align right, you can actually have a column layout that's content on the left and image on the right. You can have a pull-out quote, etc. So you can actually make a lot of flexibility for editors without them fucking up. Yeah, I'm Danish, I don't know the English word for that. So I just think for us, for me and Per, this is going to be our primary project for a long time now, to focus on the UI. It's what we love doing. For a couple of years we've been working on actually making sure that the project was stable, that we had that we could afford. Actually hiring employees and hiring agencies to help us with the UI, but essentially it just meant that we did things we didn't love, and only to hire people to do the work we love. And we need more love in the Umbraco project. So this is what Per and I are going to work on, and we would love to collaborate with the rest of you. And also make sure that it's not going to be a forever project. There's no reason as we just demonstrated, why we shouldn't be able to release this very soon. So that's Belle. I hope you like it. And talk to you at 2:30 and of course the rest of the day. So thank you very much.